Good evening, everybody. Hi. Welcome. I'm Nancy Clark. I'm a member of the Committee of the Friends of the National Library of Australia. First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. I recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I also extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this special evening, a conversation between two well-known and loved Canberra literary people, writer Marion Halligan and journalist Alex Sloan. Some of us are here in the library, others are joining us online, making this event accessible to people who can't be here in person. This is part of a series of events that provide an opportunity for friends of the library to meet and talk with noted Australian authors. Initiated during COVID, one of the reasons was to make sure that members and their friends who weren't able to come to the library could be part of the Friends community. It's a particular pleasure tonight we're able to welcome friends in person as well as online. Canberra is a place of connections, and Marion has a very close connection with the National Library of Australia. Her papers, personal papers and literary papers going back to about 1970 are lodged here, documenting her life and her writing. She was also a founding member of the Friends and a member of the first Friends Committee. Since 1987, when Self-Possession appeared, Marion's published, I think it's 22 books across many genres: novels, short stories, essays, several memoirs, some about food, some about travel, some about life. Her work's been acknowledged with many awards. She's also a noted and award-winning book reviewer, and she's held lots of roles in the literary world, including chair of the Australian Word Festival and of the Literature Board of the Australia Council. Marion came to Canberra from Newcastle to undertake a higher degree at the ANU before this building was built, and one way and another became a Canberra person. Those of us who live here see ourselves and our lives reflected in her writing, transformed. Speaking with Alex tonight is Alex Sloan. Alex is, we all know Alex. Alex is an award-winning journalist and an exceptional interviewer. Much loved and admired, she was until recently chair and is now deputy chair of ACT Writers, which is the new name for the Writers' Centre, and Marion's the patron of that organisation. Alex and Marion have a long-standing warm connection, and during Alex's years on ABC Canberra, they spoke together many times. They are both members of the Order of Australia, AMs. Today we're going to hear Marion in conversation with Alex, with particular attention to Marion's most recent work, Words for Lucy, which was published this March to great acclaim. This is a personal thing. I first met Lucy when she was about 7 months old. Mary and I had been friends in Canberra for some years, and in late 1966, we overlapped in England for a couple of months. She and her family in Cambridge, me with mine in London. We visited both ways, and that was when I first met Lucy. Memorably, on their visit to London, Marion had her hair cut at Vidal Sassoon, while I minded Lucy, along with Graham. And later we went to the theatre, and we've been talking about that we were seeing Laurence Olivier playing Shylock. Those were glory days. But the point about it is that I knew Lucy her entire loving life. The procedure for tonight is that Marion and Alex will talk for however long, and then there'll be an opportunity for audience members to ask questions. And after that, there will be an opportunity for people who have bought a book to have Marion sign it. It'll be here. A very warm welcome to Marion and Alex.
Thanks so much, Nancy. And John is sitting here in the front, and I think we've got Eddie here, grandchild, sitting alongside. So it's very lovely to have family. And in fact, the last time I think I saw John and Marion together was the closing night at Electric Shadows bookshop, which was a sad moment, and John sang a lament.
Yes, he did.
I'll never forget. So I think I managed to record it for the ABC, and it was very lovely. But look, I'm thrilled to be sitting here with the wonderful Marion Halligan. I, like so many in this room, have just loved her writing for so long. And I was just saying to Marion, I loved her writing before I came to Canberra. I knew she was a Canberra thing, you know. So there's just so many things. I like her. There's always a streak of wickedness. There's something that takes me somewhere else. I love the domesticity as well. And she writes about food in such a beautiful way. And I smiled once when she said in an interview, I keep meaning to write books with no food in them, but it doesn't work. And to this day, when I grate parmesan, Marion, because I'd never thought about this, there's a scene in one of her books with the picnic and they take hard Parmesan cheese. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'd always just grated it. So now, whenever I get the Parmesan out, I cut off a bit and it's the Marion morsel. I always just think, I'm just having a little Marion morsel before I grate the cheese. So you're always with me. This latest book, of course, is a story of love, loss and celebration of life, Words for Lucy. If you've read it, and please do, it's simply beautiful. The best a mother, who just happens to be a brilliant writer, can do for a beloved daughter. And if you look at the cover, actually, of the beautiful gap-toothed Lucy, you'll see the spangles of a disco ball across her face. Here is the disco ball, which we're going to talk about. But please welcome the beautiful Marion Halligan. Marion, we bumble our words so much when we're trying to express our sorrow at such a loss, and the loss of a child, of a daughter. So I was struck by your opening words in this book, my business is words. Tell me more.
Yeah. I suppose that what I think is that whenever anything happens, I want to put it into words. I mean, if I look at a good sunset or a field of bulbs or something like that, I think, what are the words for it? And it seems to me the words are very important because you've got to get them right. And you've got to not be too gushing either. I like to quote what I believe to be Chekhov, who said, when you want to move the heart, write more coldly. And I had an argument with Robert to say about this, as I quite often do, have arguments with him. And he said, I don't think Chekhov ever said that. Anyway, I found a reference that told me exactly where it was that Chekhov said it. So I sent that off to him. I can't remember where it was now, which was silly of me. But if I kind of go back through very ancient emails, I might find it. And I think that's a fabulous piece of advice, because if you write, you see, this is quite a cold book in some ways, in that I went back and took out anything that was a bit gushing or enthusiastic or said too much, because I think that what you have to do is allow people a sort of space to be in. And that's what I want my words to do. And the words will be Well, I call it Words for Lucy because it's not just words about Lucy. It's quite a lot of words about Lucy, but sometimes it's words for her. I write a letter to her or something like that, and it's important to me, I think, that she have a lot of words said about her, because she was a quite exceptional person. And in fact, I brought the disco ball because of my friend Carmel Birds just had a book out about called Telltale. And one of the tropes in it is peacocks. And when she launched this and so on, she had peacocks everywhere, and I thought, oh, I've got to do something
Not
here.
real ones.
Oh, no, not real ones, no. Cakes and things like that. Yes, you can make this fabulous peacock cake where you make all its... isn't it fabulous?
It's so fantastic.
Yeah.
Can't hang it from the National Library ceiling. But
I don't think either of us can reach, really.
But just to pick up on the Chekhov, I had an English teacher to say, once you've written a sentence and you're wagging your tail at the end, strike it out.
Oh, what a terrific
I wonder if he'd been a Chekhov nut.
Oh, yes, that is very good.
It was quite hard.
Because I took a lot of this out. And, yeah, that's the origin of that that statement by the person who edited The Great Gatsby, kill your darlings. If you think, oh, I'm very keen on this, got to kill it. A bit hard.
It's really hard.
It's really hard.
You have to be quite a gifted writer, I think, to kill your darlings.
But I did go through this a lot of times and tighten it up. Get rid of things.
And it's been 18 years in the writing.
Yeah.
It took 18 years to
to
let that.
Well, perhaps a bit less, because I think I finished it a bit sooner than the 18 years. But, yeah.
It just had to... Because on the next page, after you write, my business of words, love is so important to us. We so much need it. We can't do it without it. What we don't realise at the beginning is the price it comes at.
I don't think any of us do. We fall in love with people, we do this, we do that. We don't realise that it's not going to end well. It's going to, be a matter of... well, one of you's going to die, or one of you's going to leave the other, or something or other. It's all pretty dramatic stuff.
And why we aren't prepared for that. I mean, we're given... Perhaps Grimm was right.
Yes. Well, we aren't, and I think we're even less prepared for it with children, because children are supposed to outlive us. We don't think they're going to die before we do.
Well, that was the Stoics, wasn't it, that wouldn't name their children and then they would kiss them at night, not expecting to see them in the morning, and then it would be a bonus if they were there.
And you get the same thing in Seven Little Australians. Remember, the baby is called Baby, is that right? Or there's a child called the General, and then there's the baby, and then the next baby is called something else, because if they don't have a name, you're not losing them so dramatically. I didn't ever think of not naming Lucy.
No, it's a beautiful name.
It's a lovely name.
It's a really
lovely
name.
Yes.
You say this memoir... It's not a linear thing. It's like finding a box of photographs and then starting to fish them out and then tell the stories. Tell me about you just fell upon to do it that way, or?
I think that the other book that I did that way was Lovers Knots, I think. I can't quite remember what book's what now. But yeah. And the notion of taking out photographs was quite important to me, because I had the idea that you didn't want to start at the beginning. It was too boring, although I do start at the beginning, you'll notice. I was a bit embarrassed by that. But if you... if you have the idea of taking out a box of photographs, which was quite a common thing in my youth. Somebody said to me, "We don't do that, Marion, anymore. We have them on our phone. They're all here."
No, I still have a box of photographs.
You still have a box? Oh, good. Well, I'm glad that people still have boxes of photographs, because I think this is... and my image was of a grandma taking them out and saying, "Oh, look, here's Daddy in his red sports car," and "Oh, look, here's Mummy when she was a baby," and people have always talked about things like that and filled in people's ideas of their family history by doing it like that.
But you're probably right. It probably will be the phone and...
soon.
Yeah.
Unless we start printing them off and putting them in boxes.
You and I could start the campaign. Actually, Ray Martin, the journalist, one of the interviews I did with him in my sort of last days at the ABC, he said everyone once a year should print off some photographs, because he said you lose them. And you won't be able to find them. Technology will let you down.
Yes.
So everyone, make sure you have a box of photographs.
Yes, and I do think that's right, that technology will, or else, if not technology, your own lack of skill. When I try to find photographs, I often find it very difficult.
You say... While we're saying you did the box of photographs, it does start at the start with Lucy's birth, because... To quote you, it's a funny thing when a doctor tells you to have your child christened because it is expected to die. You describe this as a curse, a wicked fairy at the christening.
Yes. And we did have her christened, not because we thought that she'd end up in limbo or any of those terrible things that the church told us, but because it seemed a little ceremony, and it was important to have a ceremony for a child who wasn't going to be in the world for very long. But then the next thing I point out is that she did live till she was 38, so they were wrong, the people who said get this child christened. So that was a positive. And
you also in the book say that Lucy loved ritual. Yes, ceremony.
She did. She loved all that sort of thing. Yeah. It was very appropriate. And in fact, my son James was quite cross. He said, "You didn't have me christened." I said, "Well, we didn't think we needed to, really." And but he was put out that he hadn't been given the same ritual.
And that the doctor saying to you, if you believe I'd have this child christened, kind of opens the whole experience you have with the medical profession. And you talk about learning about the detachment and coldness of surgeons.
Yes.
Can you talk to us a bit about that?
I realised quite early on, she didn't have her first operation until she was 9, but I realised quite early on that surgeons were very cold, and I realised why this was. And in fact, just before she had her second operation, there was a baby born with his heart outside his chest, and the surgeon had operated on it. And of course the baby hadn't survived, but they had to do the operation and they had to have a go at it. And the hope was that they might learn enough to make it work next time. But I realised that a surgeon who was constantly killing children, which they were in the circumstances that Lucy was in, couldn't afford to be very warm and cuddly and friendly. The physician was quite warm and friendly, but the surgeon, no. He had to be the cold, skillful, clever person who was using all his talents to save this child. And if he failed, he couldn't let it worry him too much, really. So...
Yeah, it's interesting because I also sit on the Churchill Trust to award Churchill Fellowships, and we've just awarded one this year to a person who was bereaved, loss of a child, and has set up a volunteer kind of organisation within the NICU to help people. And I thought, boy, that's what Marion, you needed someone to talk to.
Yes.
It's fine. I can see why the surgeons have to be detached,
but you need someone.
But you've got to devastate. And then Marion paints this picture of being in Ronald McDonald House there in Gatehouse Street or in Parkville or wherever it was, quite nearby.
Yes, quite near. It's kind of just up the side of the hospital, in fact.
And of course, there's a lot of people who are poor.
Yeah. And a lot of, in fact, I mentioned coming home one night when Lucy had just had a second operation, and it turned out they hadn't turned her into a vegetable at all, as they'd been afraid they might do, because the heart-lung machine had failed and had got bubbles through it. So they quickly reversed it, but what if they hadn't done it in time? Anyway, they had. And my husband and I were there, and we felt so happy about it. And then when we walked through the sitting room of this place, there was a couple who were very poor. They had no jobs or anything like that. They came from Tasmania. They were staying in this place. And they had a baby who'd had about 7 operations and who was really not very old, less than a year old. And they decided that they had to turn off her life support systems. And this couple was sitting there and they were watching a movie on SBS. And it was perfectly apparent that this movie meant nothing to them. They couldn't read the subtitles. They couldn't do anything. They just sat there kind of dumb and quiet and unable even to face what was happening. And that was kind of terrible.
It's a breaking portrait of that, and the other one, Josephine's parents don't have her anymore. Anyway, look, read the book. I want to get on to, we're allowed to be sad because it is sad, but we want to be joyous too, because you were so struck that Lucy's life had necessarily had to be quite small because she'd done her degree and, she probably would have had a great career in the theatre and whatever, but, she wasn't able to hold a job and she lived at home. But you were overwhelmed by these incredible messages about her. Tell us about that.
It was absolutely astounding. I remember once we were in Newcastle at some sort of funny little literary festival before the sort of real one they've got there now, and I got a letter from a woman who'd sat next to Lucy, and she knew me, and she hadn't realised that Lucy was my daughter, but she got into conversation with her and talked about all sorts of things, and it was really interesting for her. And she sent me this beautiful little note saying that she'd met Lucy on this occasion, and it was just such a good occasion for her.
Yeah,
She'd enjoyed it. And a whole lot of people send us letters. I've got a box of them. Not photographs, but letters. A whole lot of things that they just met her in some place, because she used to come to things, and she used to go to the Word Festival, and she used to, be around at things, and people would often get into conversation with her and then realise that, oh, this was Lucy.
And Lucy's gifts from a disco ball to Ugg boots.
Yes, I made a list in the book of all the things, and when Carmel had all her props, I thought, I've got to have a prop. And so I thought, the disco ball, because I did go around for a while saying, oh, I'd like a disco ball, I'd love a disco ball. Disco ball would be a good thing to have on odd occasions, and not thinking much about it, because I'm not even sure that I meant it totally, really. But anyway, the box is over there under the seat. And Lucy goes, I got this box, and I thought, what's this for my birthday? And it says on the front, happy birthday, dearest Ma, with little stickers and things. When I opened it, the disco ball. And look, I love having it. And for some reason or other, I don't know, but the person who does covers for me and for Carmel, and she's done the last few covers of mine, is absolutely brilliant. She's a woman called Sandy Cull, and she just thought up for herself this idea of Lucy with the disco ball, little sequins of light. And if you turn it around, do you want to turn it around, Alex? You probably a bit more. You see, it's just wonderful. And I have it hanging in the window, and in the winter, it catches the light and shines. In the summer, the sun comes at a different angle, so it doesn't work so well. But it sparkles and fills the room with sparkles. And when a sparkle falls on a red-covered book, it gives a little red light. I just love it.
Like the rainbow catches in Pollyanna.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
Still one of my favourite films. Unashamedly. I am a bit of a Pollyanna and I love. But yes, it reminded me of that.
Oh,
Catching the rainbows.
Catching the rainbows.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
You say, you got this overwhelming response, and quite surprising from all corners of people who just loved her. Of course, for her courage, but for her humour.
She was a very funny person, and she made fabulous jokes, and I don't know, I can't think of any of them.
Well, the lovely picture of her painting everyone's toenails on the cruise.
Oh, that was good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
All lining up to get their toenails painted a bright red. But
Yes. All these middle-aged people who never had their toenails painted before, and we were on what's called a goulette off the coast of Turkey, and we had to have 2 goulettes because there were about 20 people. And so we anchored in a bay, and a lot of the people from the other goulette swam over to ours, and here's Lucy painting her toenails on the deck. And they got all terribly excited. And then at Lucy's funeral, they came up to me and said, we painted our toenails to remember Lucy by. And I thought, And she was the youngest person there, and people just loved her.
She tamed the very scary teacher.
Oh, yes. I was terrified of her.
This was a fellow teacher you'd be terrified of. Tell us the story. Yeah.
Well, she was... I'd been teaching before this. I wasn't by this stage, but I was... I still knew a lot of the people I'd been teaching with, and a lot of us were on this goulette, and she and Lucy kind of struck up this friendship. And you know how you get some fierce teachers, and even when you're a teacher yourself, you think, oh, here's a fierce person, you know, I'm quite scared of her. And I'd always been a bit shy of her and a bit nervous. But she and Lucy had this kind of mad game they played, and they'd see one another for the first time in the day, and they'd say, hello, sweetie, pretty heartsies, or whatever. They'd have all these funny kind of endearments that they said to one another, and I found this quite amazing. So did Carol Hunt, who was on this thing, and she was a bit stunned too, to hear these things coming from the mouths of these people.
So she was kind of a whisperer of the fierce.
Yes.
And whisperer of cats.
Whisperer of cats, yes. Yeah.
So writing this, has it helped, Marion? Because
look, who knows? I think it has. I started it in 2004, which was the year she died. And I just sort of wrote down bits and pieces and thought this was a good idea. And I still think that it is. I think that if you're not a very good writer, then the therapy isn't very useful. It's only useful if you feel that you can write quite well about what you're dealing with. And by the time I'd been through this a lot of times and calmed it down and got rid of the gushy bits and the enthusiastic bits and so on, I felt that it was a good thing to do.
Was that hard to throw out the...
No, I'm pretty used to it. I'm a great killer of darlings. So that although, you know, and of course I don't throw them away completely. They're still somewhere. If somebody was enthusiastic and decided to find all the bits I'd cut out of things, they could still find them. Yeah.
While I was finishing your book this week, the actor and writer Rob Delaney published, it's in an essay of books writing about his little baby son's Henry's death.
Oh.
And I don't know if anyone's read it.
No.
Oh. But I'll just read you a little bit. Why do I feel compelled to talk about it, to write about it, to disseminate information designed to make people feel something like what I feel, what my wife feels, what my other sons feel? Done properly, it will hurt them. Why do I want to hurt people, in brackets, and I do? Did my son's death turn me into a monster? That's certainly possible. It doesn't sanctify you. Things get broken. Maybe it's because I write and perform for a living that I can't help but try to share or communicate the biggest, most seismic event that has happened to me.
Yes. I think that's the thing, the biggest, most seismic event. And you have to write it down. That's what you have to do, because that's what you do.
But we're frightened of it, aren't we? To talk to you, to come up to you.
Yes. Well, yeah, people did tend to be frightened, although I think that, because I always say, oh, no, I want to talk about her. I mean, if I can't talk about her, she's sort of doubly gone. So, you know, when I see people who knew her, like Nancy, one of the things we do is talk about about Lucy, don't we?
But have you found that some people are frightened of that, or...?
I used to. I think they've got used to it with me now. She's always burbling on, I think. So they don't...
Marion, it's Marion Halligan, you don't burble, actually. If we hang off, most of the words are precious. So...
Oh, yeah.
And that, I mean, I
You
just...
can persuade people that you should talk about things, I think. I mean, it's like the whole business of grief, which is a very funny thing, and people say, oh, you'll get over it. You know... Closure. It won't, you know, it'll pass. But of course it doesn't pass. And the big thing is that you don't want it to pass. If it passed, the person... And this is, I'm sure that man with his baby didn't want the baby not to be talked about. And he doesn't actually mention that in that bit. But that's probably at the very bottom of what he's really thinking about, that his baby is still being talked about as it still exists, sort of thing.
One of the best things in the essay, when they decide they won't do any more treating, and he comes home and there's a range of carers and nurses, and he tells one of the carers, and she explodes into the... I won't... expletive deleted. Oh, F! Oh. She just starts to scream about it. And he said he was forever grateful. I think she had a Nigerian background or whatever, but he went, and she was Christian, and he just said, you know, most people would be shocked, oh, don't do that. But he went, thank God. It was a normal human response to this terrible situation. Yes. So I don't know if you had anyone come and remonstrate in front of you, Marion, or how you would deal with that, but...
No, I don't think I have.
So I suppose... I mean, I think I probably find it's a selfish thing, like there's so much wisdom and helpfulness in... Because we all... It comes to us all in some ways lost, doesn't it? When none of us get out of it.
Yeah, no, we don't. That's the thing that you're aware of, and I'm very conscious at the moment that so many writers, people like Frank Morehouse, are dying about us, and all sorts of people have just died recently, and you think, I mean, it's what comes of being 82. You know, that doesn't help, but if you think about it, it's happening a lot.
And we have dancing grandchildren in the aisle to still look out for and look after. This book also, the loss of Graham, your husband, which you wrote about, the Fog Garden, of course, it's very much, but it killed me, the loss of your sisters.
Oh, that killed me, because both of them were younger than me.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I was so angry, really, that they hadn't outlived me, that I couldn't keep talking to them, I couldn't keep asking them things. And it really means that there's hardly anybody in my life who remembers any of it. I mean, I'm with John now, but he didn't meet me until about 2001 or 2 or something. So, yeah, he doesn't know what I was like when I was a young thing, let alone a baby.
You were the good child, and was it Rosie that was the naughty?
Rosie was the naughty one, and Brenda was fairly naughty too in her day. Yes, that was funny. Yeah. But lately, they were the good ones. They were the ones that ate healthily and walked a lot and exercised and went swimming and did the Camino and so on. And I didn't do any of those things. I mean...
What's the Camino? You blame the Camino. I still don't know why people do the Camino, but I know there's a spiritual element to it, a religious element, but I'm thinking, how many days are you walking?
Yes, it's interesting. It does something for them, even people who aren't religious and not even very spiritual. That they get a lot out of the Camino.
I did once a walk through the Amalfi Mountains, and the day before I went to go and buy some goodies at the Italian shop, and I was buying one of those, candied orange peels, and she asked me what I was doing, and she said, "Why not you take the bus?" And when I was up on a sort of peak, clambering over a boulder, I thought, she was right. And you see all this rusted machinery of Italians who've just left to go to Australia and Canada for better lives, I think. But look, I will open to questions very soon, and I'd love you to ask questions of Marion. But with your sisters, you write, the loss is so immense, I cannot comprehend it.
No.
Do you think that's coming out in another?
No, I don't think it is.
You can't?
I think I can't. I can't do anything with that. I think that it's just there and too difficult, too hard. Interesting that I could do Lucy. In a way, having written about Lucy, I think I've used those things up and can't write about Brenda or... I mean, ask them. I was always writing about them. They said, especially my sister Rosie, who took exception to the fact that I had a character in one of my novels who was an editor, and she was absolutely certain it was her. I said, no, it's not really. It's not you. No.
Yes, it was.
And Brenda thought she was another person too. I think in Lovers Knots with Amber, and Brenda said, "That's me, Marion." I'd say, no. The other thing they'd say, "It didn't happen like this, did it? You made that up." And I'd say, "Yes, it did. Yes, it was quite..." They'd say, no. So I said, well, write your own book with your version of things. Don't expect me to do your version. We had great fun, my sisters and I.
I know.
Once we drove from... they came to Adelaide, where I'd been living for a few months, and brought my car from Canberra and went via Wagga and drove back and all of us drove back, and I said, no, don't bring any luggage because there's no room in the car. I've got 6 months worth of stuff. You're only coming for a few days. Anyway, they all came with piles of stuff, and you should have seen them in the car. They were absolutely buried under piles of their clothes and stuff that they'd brought. And Lucy drove. She was brilliant. And we stopped off at... I remember we stopped at a lot of places, but we stopped at Port Lincoln and bought some lobsters. Oh, that was such fun. And then we went to a bottle shop to buy some nice Riesling to have with the lobsters. And the... chap who sold us the Riesling said, oh, you girls doing a Thelma and Louise. Which wasn't a very nice thought, actually, but anyway. We said, oh, and this is an example of Lucy's quick-wittedness. She said, do you want to be Brad Pitt? And she was sharp like that, Lucy was.
I just watched that film with my daughter on Friday night. She'd never seen it. She's 22, and I went, you wait till you see Brad Pitt. But yeah, I think a lot of men say that, not realising the kind of premise really So she's gone away. This is such a feminist film, Mum. I said, yeah. You know, to any 2-year-old. There was such a thing as a feminist film in 1990. Look, can I open up to questions? Who's got some questions for the marvellous Marion? Or I can keep talking, so I'm perfectly happy. We've got a microphone here. You can see how friendly and lovely she is. It's just for the recording. We need you, if you put up your hand and we'll get the mic to you. Anyone? Look, Deb and Nancy. Go to Deb.
I don't know that you women count.
I don't know if this is a bit too personal to ask, but Rosie was an editor. And she's edited some of your books, because you've spoken with quite a lot of humour about Rosie editing your books and some of your discussions. How would you think Rosie would have been editing this book? Is that too personal, or...?
It's not too personal. She'd have found it hard, I think, but I think she'd have done it. She was a very professional editor. She said to me once, Marion, it's your job to worry about commas. It's my job to worry about your commas. It's your job to put them in if you want to. And she denied she'd ever said that, but she had. She had been... And she was very fierce with me about commas. And in fact, there was another time when, at the beginning of... what book was it? One book. She said... lose the first chapter. And she rang me up, and I could tell from her voice that she was nervous and worried, and I think you should lose the first chapter. I said, oh yeah, you're right.
Valley of Grace? Was it Valley of Grace? Yeah.
Pardon?
Valley of Grace, was it?
No, it wasn't. Yeah. It was the one...
Apricot Kernel.
Yeah.
It was too.
Would she have killed any of your darlings? Any more of your darlings?
Yeah.
Okay.
She was a great killer of darlings when she put her mind to it. Yes. I think she'd have coped doing it. I did miss her very much. I did have a terrific editor for this. And the publishers were very good with all their sort of editing and so on. But I would have... yeah. You can ask Nancy now. She's probably got a good question.
Anybody else with a question?
Did you want to ask a question? You were telling us that... sorry, Nancy. Dropped you in again.
Oh, well, you probably have heard enough from me, but I thought, well, if nobody else is going to... in the book, there are lots of times when you, and you just spoke about it a minute ago, when you write about the familiar dilemma of different recollections of what happened. And the best of all of those is the one where your husband and about to be brother-in-law had that encounter with what may or may not have been a dusty bottle of Grange, which is just it's wonderful about who remembers what. But at the end of the book, you come back to that and you say, anything I write has to be true, but truths can be different. Facts are another matter. Wonder if you could talk a bit about the difference between truths and facts.
Good question, Nancy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that is the case. I think if you're going to have facts, they have to be right. They have to be things that actually happened. But if I think something's a truth, then it is a truth. If I remember Rosie saying, it's my job to worry about the commas, you have to worry about whether you take notice of me or not, that's a truth. It's absolutely a truth. Even if she didn't say it, it's a truth. But It's not, if she didn't say it, it's not a fact. But I can't write a memoir if I don't think I'm dealing in truths and facts, I suppose. Now, that's why I like writing novels. I mean, who cares? All you have to worry about there is truths. You don't have to worry about the facts. Did this actually happen? Maybe, maybe not. I was very upset with Hilary McPhee, who was a judge of the
Miles Franklin. And she said that The Fog Garden wasn't eligible because it wasn't a novel. And I thought, oh, how can you possibly say that? You don't know that. It is a novel. I mean, everything in it isn't true, isn't a fact. Everything in it has its own truth. But as soon as you say that, of course, has its own truth. You are sort of fiddling things. But I was, and it said on the front, a novel. I was, no, this is not eligible for the Miles Franklin. It's not a novel. I'd be quite cross too.
Yes, you would, wouldn't you?
Especially. It's a beautiful book. Any other questions? I just want to, because having got to know Lucy a little through the book now, Marion's outfit tonight, I can see Lucy choosing this for you. It's just cracking. From the denim jacket to the very fashionable sand shoes to this has got a glitter in it. And
yes,
she's got amber and it's actually hooded. And I just think it's...
What you don't know is that this was hers.
Ah, see, I knew it.
It was in her cupboard, and about a year ago, I thought, hey, that's a nice denim jacket. Because Lucy's bedroom's exactly the same, as I say in the book. When people come and stay in it, they spend a lovely time sort of looking at her things and her objects and her books and so on. And it's the guest bedroom now. But no, this was Lucy's. Isn't it classy?
It's talking to me. It's talking to me.
Because Alex and I have been in the habit of going to the same dress shop, and it's closed, and it's very difficult.
And you mentioned Jane in the book, which is just so beautiful, and Callie, who I knew as well, because her daughter went to school with my own daughter. So, there's so much. But Jane chose this for me and my red coat, so I wore them especially.
That fabulous red coat. Especially
because of that connection.
You'd go and Jane would say, I've got just the thing for you, and you'd put it on and you'd say, oh no, take it off, that's not right. And it was very good because you knew she'd tell you. And then you'd put something on and she'd say, oh yeah, now that's better.
And you have it for 10 years.
That's right.
Jane, the wonderful Jane Pedersons we're talking about, who we love and miss. But I'm sure she's thrilled to be in the book. Look, if there are no more questions, all I can say...
Hang on, I've got a question.
Oh, my, sorry. Please ask it.
Marion, some of the things in your book, you must have a wonderful collection of diaries and travel books. Is that the case?
I'm not very good on diaries, actually. In fact, I'm dead hopeless. I don't tend to... What I do is keep little notes of the world around me and on bits of paper. I started doing this in France once when I didn't want to spend a lot of money buying paper. And I used to rip in halves the little flyers or in quarters, A4. So I'd write things on these, but Lucy was the one with diaries. She was the one who kept diaries.
Yes.
Not me.
You're doing okay. You're doing okay. Look, I just want to leave with the words from Marion. My dear child, these words are for you, and though I have no expectation you'll ever have any consciousness of them, yet you are alive in them, as vital as I hope you were in life.
Yes. Yes, I must say I don't really have a lot of faith in the afterlife. And I think, but think of all those Victorians, all those people with who knew a lot more about things than me, or much cleverer than me, and they believed in the afterlife. And then I think, but that was because they couldn't bear to leave their children, to lose their children. And when you think that, I think that's how it is. Henry's lost, he's gone, except as people remember him and people are upset that he's disappeared, but yeah, I suppose that's what I was partly doing, ensuring that Lucy didn't completely disappear, as she would if all the people who ever knew her died.
Well,
it's kind of difficult.
and we will definitely make sure that this is entered in the ACT Book of the Year, won't we, Deb? Marion was going, oh, will I? We're going, yes. Please thank the marvellous Marion Halligan.
On behalf of the Friends, I would like to thank you both. Marion, thank you very much for sharing such intimate parts of your life with us. This is really a very generous and a very truthful act, one that is truly humbling. I think you'll agree with me. Your book is wonderful. It is a wonderful, clever and moving juxtaposition of biography and memoir. Old Canberra restaurants, places, dress shops, designers, the cathedral at Albi are mentioned alongside many treks to Melbourne and hospital visits, all with love and affection. Thank you. Thank you, Alex, for being a partner in conversation with Marion. It is a truth universally acknowledged that conversation comes easily to women and personal truths are discussed and analysed. Your ease and expertise in the conversation this evening attests to that. Thank you. Please join me in thanking Marion Halligan and Alex Sloan again.